week, due to the different weather that we had no class. And so we'll try to cover both of them today, which will be chapters 6 and 7. But first, let's take a look at this. This, again, of course, is the diagram of our mind, the conscious, subconscious, and superconscious, the superconscious being, of course, divine mind within us. And this is the powerhouse that we have to accomplish all good things in our life. Everything comes through the mind. So it's essential that we get an understanding of this powerful mind that we have. And we'll be working with that. I wanted to put this definition of grace. We hear about grace in the Bible. And this is a definition that I like real well. It came from Roy Eugene Davis. Grace is the activity of spirit moving in and through the life of man, transforming and regenerating him. It's the activity of spirit, which is right here, within us, moving in and through us, transforming and regenerating us. And that's the grace of God. This goes on all of the time. Every one of us has in him a continent of undiscovered character. Blessed is he who acts the Columbus to his own soul. Because that's what we want to do, is we want to understand our soul nature, you see, and then begin to express the Christ through the soul nature. In fact, today's lesson that Don has should be terrific because it is on the soul today. A man's mind plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. We plan it with our mind, but if we're open to the Lord, which is the presence of God within us, you see, then we will be able to do those things which we are here in this life to do. Life is not just a brief candle. It's a splendid torch that I want to make burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. From George Bernard Shaw. And although the world is full of human suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. And this is the thing that we want to keep our minds centered on, is the overcoming of it. See, as Jesus said, in this life you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. I have risen above that level of tribulation, you see. And that's what we are to do. Any need that you have is really a vessel to be filled, while lack is a state of mind, a limitation of consciousness. Worry often gives a small thing a big shadow. I think we all identify with that. If we could buy happiness, we would probably be unhappy with the price. There is only one courage, and that is the courage to go on dying to the past. Pardon? Only one courage, the courage to go on dying to the past. Not to collect it, not to accumulate it, not to cling to it. These are all human traits that we are involved in. We all cling to the past to some degree. And because we cling to the past, we become unavailable to the present. I think you're going to see that as we unfold today's lesson. At any moment I could start being a better person. But which moment should I choose? Okay. Chapter 6, page 91, for those of you that have it, says, when Jesus says, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free, he implies that our bondage in life is caused by our acceptance of erroneous beliefs. That's a big statement. You see, he implies that our bondage in life, whatever we are bondage to, may be a worry, may be fretting over something, some limitation, some form of lack that you see and identify with, and that's bondage. We're bondage to something other than the perfect nature of God. And it's caused by our acceptance of erroneous beliefs. For some reason, we think that much of the world does. Hopefully none of us do. But for some reason, we think that God is not big enough or great enough to take care of our needs, whatever they may be. And that's an erroneous belief. Because once we believe in that error, you see, we bring that into our consciousness here, and this powerful, powerful mind that we have reproduces that which we put in. It does not judge and say, well, you know, that's not good for you to think that. It doesn't judge at all. It's not its nature to judge. It simply reproduces the dominant thought that you take into your consciousness. You must understand that. Very, very important insight. God does not judge you. The power within you reproduces that which you choose. Remember, we've said you have freedom of choice. He quotes Zeno in here, the most important part of learning is to unlearn our errors. Love that. He says, why do you work? You may smile at the question, for it seems perfectly obvious that everyone works to make a living. However, if this is the only reason you can come up with, then it is one of the errors that needs to be unlearned. It is an attitude that may well be frustrating your creative flow. If we're just working to get money, for example, and that's our sole reason for it, it is one of the blockages that we put up to the creative flow of God's good in our life. And you'll see how that works. At the bottom of the page it says your prosperity will always be a reflection of your consciousness. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Your consciousness, your thought and feeling and action will always be a reflection. It will reflect whatever's out here. In other words, whatever's in here will reflect out here in your outer. So if you don't like your circumstances out here, get back inside yourself and there make the changes. The human thing is to get out here and change everybody and everything, you see. And we mess it up that way. The idea is to get back in and change ourselves. The degree to which your thoughts are centered in the divine flow will manifest out here. Okay? If your attitudes about work in general and your job in particular are not right, then truly you are working against yourself. You may seek diligently to demonstrate prosperity, but unless you unlearn your error thoughts about work, you will forever be out of sync with the creative flow of the universe. You see, the creative flow of the universe is constantly coming through us. Remember, we've talked about that. But God has given us the absolute rule of our thoughts. We can make choices. God gives us unlimited choices to make. God does not make choices for us. He has given us that freedom to choose what we put in here. The power of God just says this: whatever you choose, I still love you. But whatever it is, I will reproduce a mental equivalent out into your world. Very, very important insight. Down at the bottom of page 92, it says, work is and should be so considered by every worker a giving process. Now, if we're just working for money or working to make a living, that's a taking process. We're taking from the work something. You see, we're not giving anything. What we need to do is begin to give of ourself. Give of ourself, which is our soul qualities, you see, out into the world. In other words, it says, don't get trapped in the error of equating what you earn with the work you do. Let your work, whatever it may involve, be an outworking of the creative flow engaged in through the sheer joy of fulfilling your divine nature. Whatever it is that you're doing as a work, do it with joy. Put your whole self into it. Give it all that you have. I don't care whether it's digging a ditch, washing pots and pans, cleaning a floor, or whatever it is. Give of your best to it. Harry.
Many people think they're working for an employer. They're actually working for themselves.
Beautiful. Absolutely. You see. And depending on our attitudes towards the work, we will experience out here the same joy or lack of joy that we put in here, that we put into our attitudes towards what we do. I don't have it with me, I meant to bring it. Abby, what's the name of that little pamphlet? Lovingly in the Hands of the Father. It's a free pamphlet, and I advise you to pick it up. You'll find it on the free lit rack in the foyer of the church. It's called Lovingly in the Hands of the Father. If you would, bring it up, and I'll show it to him. Okay. All right. If your attitudes about work in general and your job in particular are not right, then truly you're working against yourself. You may seek diligently to demonstrate prosperity, but unless you unlearn your error thoughts, you'll be forever out of sync with the divine flow. Says on page 93, the work in the job is the means by which you build a consciousness of giving, which in turn gives rise to an outworking or receiving flow. It is a subtle distinction, but an extremely important one. It's the law of mind action, what we're talking about. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. He says, if the left hand receiving your pay knows what the right hand does, which is the work of your job, then there's no real giving. See, only a bartering. This is selling your soul for a mess of pottage. All the elements needed to fulfill the prosperity law for you are missing. If you're saying, I'll do this for this, and only do this for this, I'm only bartering for a mess of pottage or for some money. Okay? We're not really giving anything of our soulic qualities, which is joy, it's a soul quality, and love, and pour it into not only the job, but everyone around us that we come in contact with, everyone that we touch. We want to be that radiating influence of God's love out into everything that we do. Says a distinguished professor at Harvard University once said, the university pays me for doing what I would gladly do for nothing if I could afford it. See, that's a whole different attitude, isn't it? What he is saying is that his work is not just a place to tediously make a living, but an opportunity to joyously live his making. Joyously live his making. He is looking at his teaching work in terms of the privilege it gives him to grow as a person, and growth is what life is all about. Whatever you're doing, whatever situation or circumstances you find yourself in, it is a growth and learning experience. Now, sometimes as a human being, it's very difficult to see some situation or circumstance that we're in and call it good. Very difficult sometimes. But it is, because it's where we need to be to get the growth that we need to rise above that particular level of understanding. See, if we were already up here, we wouldn't have the experience down here. If you understand what I'm talking about. Levels of understanding. You see. But to have the experience down here gives us the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to change. So welcome these circumstances in your life, because they're tremendous opportunities for you, for growth. The job that you have right now that you may dislike is that very opportunity for you to begin to grow. This pamphlet that Abby's looking for, Lovingly in the Hands of the Father, tells of the story of a person who hated the particular job they were in. They were keeping house, like in a boarding house. And she had to do all the work, the cleaning and the cooking and all the rest of it. And she hated every minute of it and wondered why she wasn't getting anywhere. She wanted a better job. So in talking with someone, they talked about her attitude about the present job that she was in, the scrubbing of the floors and the washing of the pots and pans and the cooking and the looking after people and all of that. And so she taught her, this lady, the counselor, taught her to think in terms of everything that she does, she placed lovingly in the hands of the Father. And 10-4 on the word lovingly, okay? And so she began to do that. And things didn't change immediately. I mean, within a day or two it didn't. But she would call the counselor every morning, and she would say, I've placed it lovingly in the hands of the Father. But before long, some people showed up at the boarding house and were talking with her, and they mentioned that there was an opening somewhere in a big hotel. Somebody wanted to find somebody to run it for them. And this is exactly what she wanted to do. And anyway, it goes in, and you can...
Just about 20 of them, but they're husbands and wives and buddies.
Okay. But anyway, the whole thing came through, and she did such a spectacular job because she brought this new attitude that she had found down here. She brought that same attitude to the new job, which was a higher job for her, and it just absolutely was the greatest thing in the world, not only for the hotel, but for the person that owned the hotel and for herself. Simply by changing her attitude towards her present work, brought about a beautiful and wonderful job that she had always wanted. But you see, now she was prepared for it, where before she wouldn't have been. She would have still carried the old attitude, and the little nitty things that went wrong, you see, she would build them up and magnify them and have the big shadow. Okay?
Couldn't that also be like the divine discontent that she had in the first place, which, along with that, helped her to go up?
I think that's correct, because that is the urge within us to help us to grow, to find that whatever it is that we need. And in her case, it was that need to feel close to the Father, to God. And she had to learn to lovingly put everything into God's hands and trust God all the way. You see? And that's one of the things that we have a problem here, is dying to the past. We sometimes let the past, you see, tell us how we're going to think and react to the present. And so we're still back in the past, and we aren't ready for the present, you see. Okay? What this lady did in this story, she had to let go of the past feelings, you see, and the past attitudes, because they weren't getting her anywhere. And she had to get a new attitude about her relationship with God. Yes?
Well, when you live in the past, you're robbing from the future.
Oh, yes. Very good.
That has to do with that very thing.
Right. That's good. Okay. Go over to page 96, if you will. It says, life is a growth process, and we grow through giving. Not just talking about money, but giving of ourselves. Giving what we truly are, which is the spiritual being that we are, giving that out into the world that we touch. Okay? Thus, no matter what the circumstance, if one ever does less than his very best in what he may be doing, no matter what the recognition or reward, he is storing up what the Easterns might call bad karma. Does everybody understand the word karma? Jesus put it this way, as ye sow, so shall ye reap. In other words, as we put out, we will get back a mental equivalent of it from our thoughts. You see, whatever we put in here, and we have the choice, remember, most of what we put in here are observations from the material sense world that we live in. And most of that information is false when it's compared with the divine ideas of God. And we have to learn to sort those out. You see, we have to learn to begin to trust completely in God and put everything lovingly, so to speak, in the hands of the Father. And just let it work out and give of our very, very best that we have in us. It says, we may wonder, what is wrong in my life? Why can I not demonstrate prosperity? And consciousness is the answer. He reiterates this Matthew 13:12, which says, whosoever hath, to him shall be given, and whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away, even that which he hath. It's a fundamental law. There is no way that prosperity can be demonstrated outside of the law of consciousness. In other words, he that hath, to him shall be given. Okay? He that hath a consciousness of God, to him shall be given those things that are God-like. Perfect peace, perfect health, perfect abundance, perfect human relationships, perfect love. But he that hath not, where we do not put in those ideas, even the little that we have will be taken away. It just disappears. It doesn't exist as far as we are concerned. And we have no ability to demonstrate perfect love if we have no love in us that we're willing to let go of. See, it's God's love anyway to begin with. It's not ours. And that's an error that we all make. We think that we have love within ourselves, our love, but it's God's love that we have the privilege of letting go out through us and reach out and touch people and lives. And that's God's love. Or a lot of times it's in human forms, and I think that's tremendous. That we can have love between spouses, between children and parents, and that comes in human form. But isn't that wonderful that we can use God's love in so many different ways? And love has a tremendous healing effect. But if we have a little love that we're willing to express, even the little we have will be taken away. And I know you've seen instances of this, of people who are not willing to open themselves up to the love of God, and pretty soon their whole attitude begins to shrivel up, you see. And they have nothing but ill will to give out, you see. So even the little that they have soon disappears. It's a great lesson that we all need to be conscious of.
On the other hand, they can blossom.
Absolutely. That's right, Harry. On page 98, it says, one man was protesting to his employer that a person of far less experience had been promoted over him. I've seen this before. And he said, why, I have had 25 years experience on this job. And the wise employer replied, that's not quite correct. You've had 1 year's experience 25 times over. How about that? He was doing the work, but he wasn't earning his wings. He wasn't growing. A corporation prospers by consciousness too, the collective consciousness of its workforce. Think about that many times. You know, if we're not growing, then we're doing the same thing over and over again, just by repetition, aren't we? And we're not growing at all. Thus, if you are just one worker, are lacking in the alive, alert, awake, joyous, and enthusiastic consciousness by which you do your job, certainly you are frustrating yourself and you are not growing as a person. You begin to shut down new ideas of growth. You shut down the attitude that whatever it is that I'm experiencing out here is a wonderful opportunity for me to grow and to learn and to change. And it's growth that our soul is crying out for. Our soul, your soul, is here in this life wave because this life wave has so many opportunities for you to learn, to grow, and to change. And that's what we all are crying out to do. Sometimes we don't like the changes that have to be made, you see, because we still are clinging on to the past. How many of us have ever clung to the past errors that we make and we're still beating ourselves over the head? Yeah. Thank God I'm not the only one. You see, that's the human thing to do. And mine stems from the old-time religion that I grew up in that said I was a sinner, you see, lower than a worm in the dust. And all of that, and I had this tremendous consciousness that everything I did was a sin. And I could never get out from under that. And some of that's still within me. It isn't all gone yet. I don't know, maybe it is out of you guys, but I still got a problem once in a while with that. It crops up, you see, and I have to deal with it, which is good. Heck of an opportunity for you to learn, because it tells you exactly where you are. And you need to get it off your backside and start moving ahead. And they're wonderful indicators for us. It says, he who has is given more, even if it means promoting another worker over you. Okay? Even if it means promoting someone else over you. Tells you where you are in consciousness, you see. The human thing to do is to blame the boss, to blame somebody else. Never blame yourself. That's not very popular. But we have to look within ourselves to see where we have stagnated our own growth. And then instead of beating ourselves over the head, just rise up, change our attitudes, and give our very best every moment of the day to our highest and best that we're able to.
Excuse me, John, I think you're talking about.
It's all right, Harry.
One idea I like is everything I do, read, think, and say is for the Father. I like it.
Right.
I didn't understand that.
Say it again.
Everything I do, read, think, and say is for the Father.
Okay. Another way to say it is every thought is a prayer. Every thought. Every thought. And think about what you're praying for.
Or you're letting God come through you.
Okay? Beautiful. We need to be conscious of that. He says, but my job is not imaginative. There's no future in it. There is no job with a future in it. This is what the world is saying. The future is in the one who does the job. When you do your work imaginatively, the job will become more meaningful and interesting, and you will become more effective in it. You can change your job, any job, if you change your attitudes about it. If you don't like what you're doing, begin to change your attitude. Begin to do whatever it is with love. Put some of these soul qualities that are crying out to be shown, put them into the job. Let it reach out and begin to bless and love everyone that you come in contact with. In Matthew 5:25, it says, agree with thine adversary, which means settle with your adverse feelings. Settle with the difficulty, and then move on. See? Because any thought, unlike the nature of God, is your adversary. Okay. When you discipline yourself to earn your wings every day, one of two things will happen. Your consciousness will bring about a change in the job, making it right for you and for your company, or another job will open up for you where a transfer will be effected in a way that is beneficial to all concerned. To all concerned. Not just yourself, but it will bless everybody. You see, concerned, even the people that you're leaving. No matter what your work, let it be your own, as Harry said. No matter what your occupation, let what you are doing be organic. Let it be in your bones. In this way, you will open the door by which the affluence of heaven and earth shall stream into you. In other words, as we break these barriers, because when we're thinking, I hate this work, I don't like these people, etc., we're setting up all of the blocks for the beautiful creative flow of God's activity through us. We're setting it up, nobody else. Not your boss, not the people that you say you don't like, only yourself. You're setting up the very barriers to expressing the things that you want to express so badly. By attitude, by consciousness. Says, about on page 99, it is a beautiful insight dealing with prosperity as a divine flow within. When you work in the right consciousness, the right thought and feeling. Page 101, about the middle, it says, begin to think of your work as a calling. The creative process is calling, singing its song to you and as you. However, it is not your song, but the will of Him who sent you. So the work becomes easy and fulfilling, and you become prosperous and successful in it. I want to move over to page 107, conclude this part. Big jump, I know. We're trying to do 2 lessons today. About the middle of the last page, it says, no matter what your job or your chosen career, your true business is the express business, the business of releasing your imprisoned splendor. That's a real job, okay? Infinite mind will always regulate your affairs so that you have an adequate job in which to sing your song. That's the truth. And you will only be able to sing it to the degree that you are willing to change your attitudes about yourself and about God. If the job becomes inadequate, if you keep yourself in tune to the creative flow, either the job will change or you will be moved to another job. Remember, I am God's living enterprise, and God cannot fail. See, we're made in the image and likeness of God, and we really can't fail. Can't fail at all. It's an attitude, isn't it? You're never a failure because you'll either earn, E-A-R-N, or you'll learn, L-E-A-R-N. Both are positive experiences. Begin to look at it. Change your attitude. Earn or learn. You're never a failure. Take the word out of your vocabulary. You don't need it any longer. You just don't need it. It's not true. You're a perfect child of God, and God is not a failure. You cannot be a failure. And learning, even with some of the experiences we have, it's a wonderful opportunity. It's a privilege. It's a blessing to have that in my life so that I got the opportunity I need to rise above, to begin to trust God more, to begin to operate my life over on this side as opposed to out here, where I am engulfed with what the world says, what people say, what they say out here, and let it govern what I think Very common to the human experience. Very common. But it also leads us down the wrong path, you see. Just because it's common doesn't make it right. Okay? We need to begin to think more from the consciousness of God. Now, how to reverse financial adversity, chapter 7, page 108. Government agencies may release statistics, this is the second paragraph, and charts indicating fluctuations of the workforce, business activity, interest rates, and the gross national product. We're hearing a lot about that right now, aren't we? Very impressive. Conveniently, nothing is said about the cause. This is because it is a mystical process dealing with the trends of thoughts of we the people. Race consciousness, the human race. The economy, as far as we are concerned, will always be to us about what we make it, how we decree it, what we expect it to be. It's an attitude, isn't it? It's an attitude. During the Depression of the 30s, I know many people that became millionaires during the Depression. And why did they, while so many other people were just eking out a living? Simply because of their attitude. One of my friends was an insurance salesman. And he told me that he would start every Monday morning, and he'd start out, and this was in Detroit, and he'd go down the street and he'd ask everybody he met to buy insurance. Do that every day. He would open himself up to creative ideas. He went to lodges and designed a small life insurance program for every member, and so on. He sold a lot of insurance. But I said, well, what about the rest of the people? And he said, well, they were all back having coffee, telling each other how bad the economy was. And that's the truth. And he was out just asking people to buy and coming up with some creative ideas that would help, opening himself up to the flow. For him, the economy was terrific because he had a terrific attitude about it. And he was not going to let what they say determine what he said within himself. Many people like that during the Depression. This is on page 109, if the consensus is that something awful is happening, then something is happening right here, right there. For the economy is little more than a barometer that registers the highs and lows of consciousness. It registers, it's the outpicturing out here of what's going on in race consciousness, in the thought and feeling of the human race itself. It sends out an energy, you see, and that energy is reproduced in experiences, events, and circumstances out here. What you see out here is a barometer of what's going on in here. That's true of the nation, of the world, of your own personal life. Wherever two or three are gathered together in the interaction of minds, a very real energy force is projected into the world. If it happens to be a prayer group or a positive discussion group, then there is a healing or prosperity influence. If it is the sharing of negativity, as so often the case, that consciousness goes forth as a beacon of darkness, adding to the weakening of the economy. Same thing happened in the 30s. The mass consciousness was that of lack and limitation, you see. And until that changes, you see, nothing out here begins to change. I knew of another man that during the Depression, there were long lines for people wanting to get work and you'd finally get up there and it said no help wanted. Factories were closing down, so on and so forth. The fellow I know was out of work, and what he did, he decided what kind of an industry he wanted to work in. Then he went, excuse me, he went and studied all he could in the libraries about that particular industry. Then he selected a company that he wanted to work with. He talked with people that worked in the company. He talked with other presidents of other like companies in that industry. And then he finally went in for an interview, and he said, instead of saying, I need a job, what have you got for me? He said to them, I have 3 ideas that I think will vastly improve the operation of your company. I will work for your company for 1 month without any salary. And if at the end of that time, when the company has seen the growth that it can have with my ideas, then you can pay me what you think I am worth. Obviously, he got the job because he was there to give, not to take. There were lines of people wanting to take because they needed. This one came in, I don't want to take anything, I want to give. I want to help you to prosper. Attitude, consciousness. See, he got a job. You say, well, good Lord, he didn't get any money for a month. The people in line hadn't had it for months and didn't for months to come. He was only out 1 more month. But I can assure you that when he helped the company to grow, he was rewarded likewise because he put himself into it, you see. Page 110 says, talks about, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, or stands in the way of sinners. Oh, my vodka.
That's on tape.
It's all right. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. Now, this is the first psalm. The psalmist clearly states that if you refuse to agree with the gossip of negative people, the counsel of the wicked, that's the sayings of the negative people, and keep yourself in tune with the divine law of prosperity, because abundance and prosperity is a divine idea of God. If we keep in tune with that, then you can be certain that substance will flow as easily to you as substance flows to the tree planted by the river. The great discovery of the new insight in truth is that consciousness is the key to all things that happen to us. Consciousness, thought, feeling, and action is the key. Very important. Certainly the key to personal prosperity. The starting point in changing your life from financial reverses to an experience of abundance is the realization that you can change your life by altering your thoughts. The change from lack to abundance takes place first in the powerful mind that you have. That's the point. Not out here trying to regulate and change things out here. But first get back inside of yourself, make the changes in there, begin to build a consciousness, a thought and feeling of prosperity, whatever that means to you. You've got to live what you want to be here first before it ever appears out here. That's the point. You must understand. You have to live it in here first before it appears out here. We'll have our sharing, and then I want to bring that home to you a little better. What?
I'm just going to put those in and take them out as they want.
Okay. Do you have, you going to use that for the?
Yes, I want to have it.
Okay. Okay. Okay, let's just take it. And whatever it is that we want to share right now, Father, we just bless it, release it out into the universal with a consciousness of joy. So whatever it is, we feel good about it, feel joyous. We put ourselves into it by blessing it, releasing it, where we know that it does a beautiful job in the circulation of God's universe and God's good. And we're part of that now. So we give thanks, Father, that we have this privilege and opportunity, and we affirm it all in the name and through the power of Jesus Christ. So it is. Amen. Okay. Now I want to read from this book, which is called Your Faith is Your Fortune. And the author is just simply called Neville, Neville. Your Faith is Your Fortune. Don't even know if they have it in the bookstore. Bought this many years ago. But it says, remember the reward is on the one who endures. Stand still. And standing still is the deep conviction that all is well, it is done. Attitude. And the deep conviction that all is well, regardless of what's going on out here. No matter what is heard out here or seen out here, you remain unmoved, conscious of being victorious in the end. You're building that consciousness that you're under God's divine guidance and all is well. And you take no thought or no mind of what's going out here that looks to be opposite from what you're affirming in here. All things are made by such agreements. Let me repeat that. All things are made by such agreements, and without such an agreement, there is not anything made that is made. The agreement in here. The agreement that all is well, and you begin to live it as though it were the absolute truth. Not easy. But this, you make that agreement within, that all is well, I am under divine guidance each moment of the day and night into prosperous and abundant activity. Wonderful affirmation. But all things out here are made by just such agreements. See, we can agree the opposite as well. We can agree that the world's going to hell in a handbasket in a hurry. We can make that agreement within. We can begin to live our life based on that truth as we believe it to be. And we will then create and produce the mental equivalent of that thought. Of that thought. Says you cannot force anything outwardly by the mightiest effort of the will. There is only one way you can command the things you want, and that is by assuming the consciousness of the thing desired. You do not go out and spend money you don't have. That's not what it means. It means that you begin to live in here. Build that consciousness of the thing you desire here first. Then the mental equivalent will appear in your life out here. You must accept without reservation the fact that by possessing or feeling a thing in consciousness, you have commanded the reality that causes it to come into existence in concrete form. You have commanded the power to bring forth that which you have possessed within. The power to bring it out here. When you really understand and believe these things, you will have built up so profound a certainty that nothing can shake you. That nothing can. See, if we're not steeped in the consciousness of God, then the first thing that happens out here, what happens to us? Bing, we're back down where we were. That's the human trait in us, you see. That's the thing that we have to be careful of. And when we do that, as we do from time to time, it shows us exactly where we are in consciousness and what we need to do to continue to work, to stay up on that level. That's the inner work that we need to do. Those are the ways in which we know how we're doing. And then, of course, the trick is that when we do fall down a little bit, you know, the temptation is to stand there and beat yourself over the head and say, poor little old me. You know. And what we need to do is to bounce back up and know that we will be victorious in the end because we're in the consciousness of God. And God is pure, perfect, and perfect power within. And we have all of the powers that God has. The only thing is we don't know it yet. And he finishes this chapter by saying, now let the saying sink deep in your ear. Be conscious of being that which you want to appear. Be conscious of being that which you want to appear. Same thing is done in healing. You see, you must do the healing activity in here. You must see yourself, experience yourself, feel yourself as whole, perfect, and complete on the inner, on the spiritual side. Be consciously aware that at your spiritual level, you are already that wholeness that God is. Be conscious of being that which you want to appear. Be conscious that you're already healed. And don't waver from that. It's not easy. The human thing is when we get that little pain or sick feeling, you know, we're back down there again. We're saying, well, that's a bunch of baloney because I don't feel good. That's the human part of us, you see. But we need to get back up there and be conscious again of that which we truly are. Whole, perfect, and complete. This fellow Neville, he wrote one other book called Resurrection, which is extremely good as well. How are we doing on time? Got to do this. Going to work on a problem solver. If we're talking about these things. There's also, in addition to developing the consciousness of what we want to appear out here, that's solving problems. There is a way in which we can work through a problem as well that will help us to stay up on that high consciousness of truth. And here, if you'll take one and pass one back, please. I want to work through this with you, take it with you, and share it with others, if you'd like. It's an excellent way in which you can help solve problems in an outer way as well as on an inner way. It will help to keep you in a positive mode when you're working through a problem. Now, the next thing I want you to do is forget the word problem, even though it's on the thing, and call it a project. So if you're working on a problem, let's call it a project. A problem, because of our past conditioning in our life, is a negative thing. We think of when you mention a problem, immediately it builds up a negative consciousness within. Because it says it's a lack, there's a limitation. We don't have something that we really need to have. And so it's much better if we refer to it as a project. Okay, now with that, and we're going to read problem in here, but first of all, you'll see number one, what is my problem or what is my project? And let's say that the problem is, how can I get enough money to pay my bills? First of all, this is important, number one, is to actually sit down and write out your project. Write it out. Many times you'll find that when you're thinking about this project, that you're not quite sure what it really is. And so you'll write it out and you'll make some changes and so on, and many times a solution will appear as you write it. To write definitely, I've done this many times, and you write down what the project is and you look at it and say, well, that's not it at all. You know? And so it's to get clearly in mind what it is. Now, number two, how important is my problem? And that you need to think about the project. How important is this project? Is it number one? Do I need to work on it immediately? Or is it down below? And let's say that this project or problem is number one. So we say, what are the facts? What are the known facts? Well, the known facts might be my bank account is zero, cash in my pocket is zero, I don't have a job, I borrowed all I can from my friends, my creditors are putting the pressure on for my payment, my credit worthiness is deteriorating, and so on and so forth. Those are the known facts. Okay? They're the outer facts. Okay? You might also attack it from the inner. The fact is, from the inner realms, is that I have the power within me to complete my project. The power is within me. Okay? But you can use your own abilities on that in thinking through on this. Now, number four is, what are the unknown facts? In this particular case, an unknown fact might be, where can I get a job? Another unknown fact is there any other source that I could borrow from temporarily? How can I stop my credit rating from getting any worse? Might be an unknown fact. Who can I talk to for help, for advice? May not know that. And you begin to list all of the things that, yeah.
The unknown facts, too, are also the fear things. Will my creditors foreclose on my house? Will I lose my car? Will my insurance? And those are really the fear factors that come in that you really don't know about, and they worry about.
Okay, thank you. Next, turn it over, and you'll find number five is, where can I get additional information? And we're beginning to build on this. One of the places would be a library. Might be able to look up some different things about it. Might go to your banker and sit down and talk with the banker about the particular project. You might go and talk to the credit companies. Find out how they operate. What can you do, you see, to enhance your credit rating, even in the condition you are? You might want to go to credit counselors to get additional information. Go to people who have money, who you respect. How did you get it? How did you do it? You'll find, amazingly enough, that when you you think, well, the president of so-and-so is very successful and he's in the business that I'd kind of like to be in, but he'd never see me. That's a bunch of baloney. They love to talk to people like that. I've done it myself. California, when I lived out there, I was in a course and we had a project, and one of the projects was to go to someone who was in a high office, like a president of a company or something like that, and interview him. You'd think, well, you couldn't get in, but you can. And it'll give you more time than you asked for. You see, because they're interested, they're up there usually because they have been giving. Remember, we talked about the work is in giving, and they want to give out, and that's part of what they do. You might, it says, where can I get additional information? Spiritual guidance from counselors. Excellent place to begin to build the spiritual side. You might talk to people who are already successful in the kind of business I want to be in, you see. You might talk to people who have taken a hobby and developed it into a business. You might have a hobby, for example, that you could develop a beautiful business out of. And these are the different places where we can get additional information. 6, what are the possible alternatives? What are some solutions? Let me list. You use the brainstorm concept. You know what that is? The brainstorm concept. You either yourself or you get a bunch of people in, and you begin to, you got the project up here. All right, let's have some alternatives. Let's have some solutions. And the whole secret is you don't judge any of the solutions regardless of how funny they are or how bad they sound. Just let them flow, because here's the idea. As you begin to open up and give out the ideas, more will form. But the minute you start judging it and say, oh, that won't work, you begin to shut down the creative flow. And you'll get some funny ideas, but let it come. Some might be, for example, in this is borrow from a life insurance, borrow from credit cards, borrow from the banker, start a new business, go into sales, insurance, real estate, manufacturer's rep, cosmetics. Begin calling a campaign to all companies that are in the kind of business I want to be in. Prepare and send out resumes. Turn a hobby into a business, etc., etc. But just keep writing down as many different wild ideas, wilder the better. And don't judge a one of them. And always write them down. Then when you're exhausted, and you may have a bunch, we did, in the course I was in California, what we did was we spent some time on what kind of trousers or pants could we make. And we had a board, a blackboard that covered like this whole wall back here, and we loaded it up. We had brick pants, and we had iron pants, and we had all kinds of wild, crazy things. But within there were some gems that came through. So, number 7, you choose the best alternatives. In other words, then that's the point that you start to judge. After you've written them all down, begin to cross out the ones that are wacky and crazy, that you know won't work, and you begin to look at the ones that are left. And what you try to do is boil it down to the best. And you might want to put 1, 2, or 3 in that order. And then, of course, number 8 is to go into action. Okay? And this is particularly helpful if you have that sunk feeling and you think that you're lost and there's nothing that you can do. This will help to buoy your attitudes back up, you see, and get back into that consciousness of being consciously aware that you're already there. And you build it in here first. Then it will appear out here, a mental equivalent. Okay? This is a technique that you can use to help raise your level of confidence that there is a solution, you see, and get you back into that track of attacking this project from the consciousness of God, because within God mind, the solution lies. And God mind is in you. So the answer to your project is already within you. And this is a technique that you can use to bring it forth. It's only one technique, but it's been extremely helpful in so many thousands of lives across the country. Abby uses it a great deal in her work with her girls. And they've had some very creative things happen because of it, you see. It raises a consciousness from where you're down here, reaching up, trying to touch bottom, to where you get up here, and you begin to see that a solution is out there, and that it raises your expectancy of good coming into your life. Okay, so take that with you. Do we have a bunch left over, honey? Okay, and Abby has those little pamphlets, if you like, okay, when you leave. Okay, let me go back to page 112. It says, in every attempt in life, this is midway, second paragraph, in every attempt in life, there must be the possibility of success and failure. Listen to this. We must have the stability and the perspective to deal with both success and failure in spiritual poise. You see, to become too elated with success and too crushed by defeat is indicative of an imbalance. But isn't that the human part of us? We go so high and then we fall so low. And the idea is to straighten that line out so that we neither get overly elated nor do we fall below that line very much. And that's part of the job of, and if we have the consciousness of God, we will be in perfect balance. In every setback, we should be buoyed up with the realization that nothing is ever a complete loss. Nothing is a failure. Take that out. Life is fundamentally a matter of growing. Missing the mark is one of the ways in which we learn to hit the target. Think about that. It's one of the ways. We practice, we try, you see. We practice filling our heart and mind with the consciousness of God. Sometimes we slip down, but it's a learning process. It's okay. Sometimes when we're aiming at the target, we miss it. So what do? We put another arrow in the bow and we try again. And we try to learn from our mistake the first time. It's a growing process. It's wonderful, wonderful. As we change our attitude towards the things that are happening in our life, you see, we're going to build a consciousness of power and peace and love and joy. And that will radiate out with this beautiful energy of God. And it will take its place out here, a mental equivalent of what's going on in here. So this is where our work really is inside, in the inner. We have erroneously thought of success as getting there, while actually success is earning the right to be there. Okay, not just getting there, but earning the right to be there. And when you're there, you will be there by right of consciousness. Says it is, page 113, it is not being unemployed or even being employed that makes the difference in our lives, but how we accept these conditions, the attitudes, the feelings, the general tone of our consciousness as we face the experience. The attitude, the consciousness is so vitally important. It's so vital to us. Remember, on page 117, he talks a lot about turning a problem into a project, okay? Think in terms of that. That it's a project you're working on. A project has a lot of excitement. The word has a lot of excitement in it, doesn't it? While problem has a negative connotation to it. So we're working on projects because there always is an answer and you will rise above the current level of the project to full completion, because you have the power within you to do so. Okay, like I say, I had at least 2.5, 3 hours of class work to do, but read it yourself. Next week we'll be in chapter 8, Security in a Changing World, which I think you'll find extremely interesting. Take the problem-solving formula, use it for some of the projects you may want to work on, and pick up the, if you wish, the little pamphlet from Abby. Let's just take a moment. And Father, we are so grateful for this opportunity that we have to learn, to grow, and to change. And we recognize and realize that we have the privilege of being consciously aware of that which we want to demonstrate in our lives. For whatever powers God has, we have. And we now dissolve anything unlike the full nature of God so that we can be the open channel to fully radiate out into our life and affairs the perfect love and peace of God. We're so grateful, Father, to have this understanding that we can be that which we dream of being. And that is a beautiful, bright light, perfect channel for the full and complete expression of God's good. Thank you, Father, for all that we have, all that we are. And we affirm this prayer in the name and through the power of Jesus Christ. So it is. Amen.